Hello, everybody. Just gonna make sure that we are streaming on all of our channels, and then we will go ahead and get started. Okay, I think we're set. All right. Okay, I think we are all set. All right, for those of you who are watching us today from Facebook, we are streaming on our main Facebook page. So we posted a link in the group, but I'm going to go ahead and do that again right now just to make sure that everyone is set. Hold on one second. And then we'll go ahead and we will start. All right. All right, thank you all so much for your patience. Okay, so I am first going to introduce myself for those of you who are new to us and who are new to MedEdits. My name is Dr. Jessica Freedman. I am the chair and founder of MedEdits Medical Admissions. I am a physician. I'm a former medical school admissions officer, residency admissions officer. I founded MedEdits about 17 years ago now, and I have been doing this privately ever since, getting a really broad understanding of medical school admissions, residency admissions around the country, working with undergraduates from across the country, all different types of applicants who are aiming for all different types of medical schools. And I am so happy tonight that one of our outstanding professor level advisors is here with us tonight. I want you all to meet Dr. Trish. She is also a physician. She has been an associate residency director as well. And she has served on a medical school admissions committee at a major medical school, here in the United States. And her students love working with her. And so I'm thrilled that she's here tonight, and she's going to help answer some of our questions. So please welcome her if you don't know her already from working with her. Okay, so as for those of you who have been here for a little while, what we initially do is we go through and we look at the questions that you have all posted in the parents group, and we will answer those first. And then if you do have questions from wherever you are, please post them from wherever you are in the comment section, wherever, whether that's Facebook or whether that's Instagram, and we will most definitely see them here. So I'm going to go ahead and I am going to post our initial question. Let me also sort of just orient everybody in terms of where we are in terms of the medical school admissions processes right now. We have students who have already committed to their medical schools if they're applying, if they apply during the 2023-2024 application cycle. We have students going to a whole bunch of amazing medical schools this year. So we definitely have students who have committed and who are absolutely set on where they're going. We have students who are still getting off of wait lists. We have a couple of students who are still waiting for some wait lists to see if those wait lists may convert. And then we are also starting to work with our students for the 2024-2025 application cycle. If you have not started working on your primary application materials yet, do not worry. The month of May is a very, very busy month. Yes, AMCAS has opened, but as long as you submit your AMCAS application and all of your applications by sometime in June, you are still going to be super duper early in the process. We are also starting to hear from our residency applicants who are applying for residency in the upcoming cycle. And so there's a lot of, this is always sort of a very exciting time as we kind of, graduate, the previous class, and then welcome our new class of students, as they start the process. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to start posting these questions from that that we had posted in the group, and we can answer them. So this question is: should awards be listed under the activities section? Should each award be listed separately, or do you list them all together? Dr. Trish, I don't know if you want to take that one or if you'd rather I take it.
Yeah, I mean, I can start answering, and then you can let me know if what your thoughts are on it. So what I usually tell students is that in listing an award by itself, as if you would put it on a CV, it is not that meaningful, even though the award itself is meaningful. And so what you really want to do is present the context around the award, right? So I usually have students write about the experience that led to the award or why that award was given. And I do the same thing actually with publications, is I like to write about the research that resulted in that publication or product, whether it was a poster or an abstract or a presentation, because then you also get to write about what you did and what you learned, and you have the opportunity to demonstrate some of the entering competencies for medical students within that description. And that just makes for a much richer experiences essay or entry than simply just listing a bunch of awards that you received in college.
Yeah, I completely agree with this. And sometimes what I explain to students, especially for academic awards that are given for a very high GPA, for academic excellence, medical school admissions committees are going to be looking at your GPA. And sometimes these designations are automatic depending on the GPA that you earn. So sometimes it sort of is almost redundant to include some awards on your application. So, and we always look at these things, of course, within context of what other experiences and things the student has to write about. Do they have space for, to include their awards and things of that nature? So, there are a lot of things that we are considering when we're advising students on this. Okay. All right. Okay. So there is I see a comment on Instagram, but for some reason it's not appearing. So I'm just going to go ahead and read this one, and we can go ahead and answer it, Dr. Trish. I had a question regarding med school applications with respect to med schools in the States in general and Canada. How are breaks in the semester looked upon on the transcript? Is that considered?
I'm not entirely sure I understand.
Yeah. So I think what the student's asking is if there are breaks in time, sort of gaps in time on the transcript. I think this is what the student is asking. How is that looked at? And so when you have a gap in time on a transcript, on your resume, that is always something that needs to be addressed. And I can tell you that when I used to review applications for both residency and for medical school, this was something, honestly, I was sort of known as the person who really paid attention to gaps in time, because oftentimes when students do have gaps in their background, that can really signify a red flag. It can signify something that happened in their background. And if you don't pay attention to that as an admissions officer, sometimes you can end up, bringing in students who have issues that might really make for a difficult residency experience, and then for you as a residency director, it makes for a very difficult situation, or as a medical school dean or something of that nature. So we always recommend, if you have a gap in time, whether that's an academic gap, whether that's a gap that you see in, let's say, after you've graduated from college, we always recommend that you address that in your application. Absolutely. That's a great question. Okay, let me go back to the group. All right. This is a great question because it is something that comes up a lot. And it has a pretty simple answer. So with regard to the work activity section, is there a particular order that they need to be listed chronologically, medically related first, etc.? So Trish, answer that or not?
Honestly, I personally don't think it matters. And I usually say go chronologically because to me it just makes the most sense. When I'm looking at the application and reviewing it, it just helps me map where you did it within the course of like, you know, your life, right? So I can tell if you started it in high school and then continued it all through college, if you started it mid-college, if it was something you did in your gap year. But I just think it's the most logical.
Yeah. So it definitely is wise to present things chronologically. Usually when we are working with students on their personal statements, we are advising them to take a somewhat chronological approach to their narrative. When it comes to the actual work and activities on AMCAS, they are actually ordered by the system chronologically. So automatically, the first ones that are going to appear are the ones that are the most recent or the ones that, let's say, are anticipated, so that your most recent activities are at the top of the application. So as the reviewer, if they choose to review the application in the order that it's presented to them, they are always going to be looking at your most recent activities first, and then your more distant activities last. So to some degree, you don't necessarily, I mean, you can try to manipulate, you know, kind of the order, but to some extent that's going to be done automatically for you. So there's not even a lot of thinking that you have to do. All right. And I see you're all starting to post questions. We're going to get to those in a second. All right. What is the minimum science GPA to get into a top school? It's a loaded question. I think first it depends on what is considered a top school, right? Everyone has their own idea of what a top school is. And whenever we start working with students, we always talk to them about what are your goals. This is always going to be our question, you know, and in fact, I just answered a question that was on the Facebook forum, you know, do I have to retake the MCAT? And the question is, well, it depends on what your goals are. You know, where is that MCAT going to get you? And is that where you want to be? So in terms of what is the minimum GPA that's going to get you into a top school, I think if we're talking, you know, I don't know, Dr. Trish, if you agree with me, but I think if we're talking, let's say, the most selective medical schools in the country, we're going to ideally want to see a 3.8 science GPA or higher for the most selective schools. Obviously, the higher, the better. And I don't know if you have anything to add to that at all, Dr. Trish.
No, I don't think I have anything to add to that. That's pretty clear.
Higher is always better, but you know, they look at trends. You know, there are a lot of different things that are going to be looked at when your academic record is, you know, is really, you know, evaluated by admissions committees. Okay, I have one more question I'm going to post, and then we're going to get to all of your questions that you're posting in the, you know, during at this moment. So thank you for your patience. Okay. Is it okay to apply for the match if you are graduating in December for the residency match? So if you're off cycle, which is not typical.
It's not typical. So, you know, the answer to that actually is it depends. Mm-hmm. If you are an off-cycle student, I actually always tell people to work with their medical school, and they really should be giving you pretty definitive advice on which of the two matches you should be applying to. Because graduating off-cycle, I mean, what you needed to complete in that time you're off cycle can impact how you're presenting your application to a residency match. So I actually think it depends on the student and what your coursework looked like in your last 2 years. So I don't feel like that's a very straight answer, Dr. Friedman. If you
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree. We generally, with a student in this situation who's graduating off cycle, which again is not a typical type of situation, this is usually something we need more information about. We rarely recommend that students lose their student status if they're applying to the match. And this also comes into consideration when we're working with students who, let's say, for some reason don't match. And then the issue becomes, well, do they graduate with their class, or do they try to keep that student status for the following year? So I think losing student status before you actually have matched into a specialty, there's always a little bit of risk involved. But certainly, and maybe this is a student who graduated from a Caribbean medical school, perhaps, or had to take a leave of absence for some reason. So I think that there are too many variables for us to really give you a very definitive, straight answer for that. We would want to know kind of more of the details. All right. I love questions about majors. Our son will be starting pre-med this fall. Congratulations. His major is biochemistry. We did a department visit yesterday, and the professor was very direct and truthful about how difficult biochemistry is. How is a major looked at like biochemistry versus biology when you're applying to medical school?
I'm gonna let you answer it.
So I answer this question at least once a day. Major does not matter when you are applying to medical school. What matters is that you are interested in the major, that you can excel in the major. Maybe your son is a biochemistry whiz and he just loves biochem. I mean, it's tough to say, right? Because he hasn't even started his freshman year yet. Most students have not taken biochemistry in high school. So I would probably first explore what is a biochemistry major. I would first want him taking a biochemistry class. That usually isn't going to be happening until the second year of college at the absolute earliest, because we still want you taking those prerequisites. We don't want you, taking AP credits to place out of them. So the student should ideally choose the major that interests them the most, but one in which they will ideally also be able to perform as well as possible. So if a biochemistry major, for example, the student sort of takes a biochem class, realizes that, okay, I don't really have an affinity for biochemistry, and I got, a C minus, for my first class, then maybe it's, maybe choosing a biochem major is not the smartest thing. So these things have to be sort of decided carefully, and you need to consider what the student is most interested in, but also what is going to lead to the most success. And you want to consider those two things in parallel as much as possible. Okay. Hi, Jennifer. When should Preview and Casper be taking for this application cycle? And what is a suggestion for studying?
I'm going to answer this one. This one's an easy one, I think. So I think I will start off by saying I think people really worry about these two situational judgment tests and their performance and how to prep for them. And they're really not meant to be these anxiety-provoking situations. I mean, they really are just meant to be a way that medical schools can see another facet or side of the human being who is applying to be in their class. So I always try to tell people, do not panic about these. This is not like taking the MCAT or even taking a final. This is not something that should be stressing you out. It needs to get done, but it should not take too much of your brain space. In general, I actually tell applicants to take these tests during the June test dates, because I like for my students to submit their primary by the first week of June, if at all possible. And then they have time to kind of take a breath, relax, prep for these tests, take them, and get them over with before their secondaries start coming in July. And then what do you need to do to study? Honestly, I mean, for Casper, they have a great webinar and a practice test that they publish. You do that. And for preview, the AAMC has some great preparatory material that's, freely available on their website. And I just tell people to work through that. And that honestly is more than adequate. I don't know if you have anything else.
Yeah, no, I agree with all of that. That's awesome. Okay, I'm just scrolling through the questions. And yes, I mean, I just sort of want to reiterate what Dr. Trish said. These are not tests to stress about. Most of the study, I really did last year a very deep dive on the prep materials that existed, because you did ask, Jennifer, about prep. And most of the materials that I found online are really not accurate. They are not a great reflection of the test. And to sort of, as I was looking for a course that I thought would be suitable for our students to recommend, I decided that I didn't really like anything I was finding. So we created our own course for our students. You really want to do very focused prep for this. You don't want to spend hours upon hours upon hours. Some students erroneously think that if they get a great Casper score, it's somehow going to trump a low MCAT score, and that simply isn't. That's not how it works. How you do on Casper is really used to sort of corroborate other information in your file, rather than sort of, it's not a decision-making piece of the puzzle. So when you're prepping, I really recommend using just the materials that are put out by Alta Suite. They're the ones that administer Casper, and by the AMC that administers Preview. And honestly, I don't think students really need much more than that. Our students really wanted a prep course, so we created one for them. But I really think that students can prepare adequately just by using those materials. Okay. Can volunteer hours and shadowing hours completed during high school count towards med school application, considering the student continued with the same activities during their undergraduate studies?
Yes.
Yes. Absolutely. So yeah, anything that you started in high school, if it's still ongoing during undergrad, you're going to put the start date as whenever that was, 2023, 2024, depending on what the start date was. And then the end date is going to be whenever the end date was. And if that was during undergrad, then yeah, absolutely. And this is also how students demonstrate, a longevity of, interest in medicine. So that's terrific.
And I would say it's all your activities, not just volunteer hours or shadowing. I mean, if you had paid employment that you started in high school, and you continued it throughout undergraduate, even if it was just like your summer breaks, but you consistently went back. I mean, I have people put their paid employment in as an activity. And I think, the longer you've been doing something, the more commitment it shows, whatever that activity may be.
Yeah, agreed. Okay, so Jana asked, my son did 2 certifications requiring credits almost equal to minors, and as a result spent 2 years for early college during an early college program and 3 years in undergraduate college. How do med school admissions committees look at this? So this is a student who got so many college credits that they graduated from college in 3 years, getting their undergraduate degree in 3 years. How do med schools look at that?
I mean, I think the answer to this question, with a lot of questions where there's not a straightforward yes or no question, is it really depends. I think it depends on, well, what did that student do with those 3 years? What classes did they take and how did they perform? Did they take their pre-med recs over again and still perform very well? What did they do with the fact that they graduated early? Did they apply to medical school early? Did they take a gap year? And if they took a gap year, what did they do with that time? I don't think that the fact that you graduate college early necessarily earns you any like bonus points. And I don't know if that's the like underlying question here. I personally wouldn't have looked at an application and said, this person graduated in 3 years versus a person who graduated in 4, or honestly, a person who graduated in 5. And that number in and of itself doesn't really matter to me as a number. It really matters in the context.
Yeah, absolutely. And we definitely have more students now who are finishing college in, I would say, usually 3.5 years, because they're coming into college with so many AP credits. So if they're at an institution that takes those AP credits, they have enough to graduate with. And, most of them are taking advantage of what is usually an extra semester by, either getting a job, doing research, really diving into things. So again, I want to echo what Dr. Trish says. It isn't, no one cares how much time it took you, frankly, to do anything. For the most part, it's a question of what did you do with your time and what did you accomplish during that time. That matters more.
I can't remember which student asked me, but they're applying this coming cycle, and they said, I'll be done. And so this semester they had was like extra. And I said to them, well, why don't you go study abroad? Go do something that you find meaningful or that will help your own self-development or help you explore another aspect. And I think there are a lot of options available to you in undergraduate that you will never get again. And I think that that's part of your own personal growth. And that comes across when you apply to medical school as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And also now that interviews are virtual, I mean, before the pandemic, we never could have, or we would recommend that, but with caveats that, okay, you're going to have to be able to just hop on a plane, when you get an interview invitation. And now that interviews are virtual, we no longer have those geographic limitations. So it allows for a lot more flexibility. Okay. Good questions tonight. All right. For the activities, I have 16 and need to choose between adding Dean's List and Magna Cum Laude and a BLS certification. Which one may be better?
Well, what I was going to say to part of that is we covered it a little bit in the beginning with that other question about listing awards. Something like the Dean's List or Magna Cum Laude, which are things that are awarded automatically based on your GPA, you really don't need to list as an activity because they have your GPA information and they can infer those things just by looking at those numbers. And even though Magna Cum Laude can differ slightly from institution to institution, the cutoffs are all pretty similar. So that, I know that means you've got more than a 3.5, but less than a 3.85, right? I mean, and then I can see that too, based on your GPA. So I would say there's no need to list your Dean's List or your honors.
Yeah, and also BLS. I probably wouldn't have a student list BLS as an activity. So, and then if you have 16 activities and the question is which two can you potentially merge? This is something that we often work with our students on when we're helping them with their activities. The only caveat that I want to add, I was recently working with a student who was elected Phi Beta Kappa, and it was an award that was not automatic based on a GPA. There actually had to be faculty recommendations, and it was a tiny, tiny percentage of the graduating class that got Phi Beta Kappa. So for that, it's possible that could be an entry, of its own, again, depending on how many other entries you have that are competing for one of those 15 slots on AMCAS. All right, Sujana asks, I'm hearing that if Texas students do not get into Texas med schools, the chances of getting into med school outside of Texas is almost none. Is that true?
No. I would say no. I think certainly, Texas has a very robust public, program, right? They have several schools that are very much only open to Texas residents. But just because you don't get into those schools doesn't mean you can't get into one of the many other private allopathic schools in the rest of the country, or even the public ones that take a large number of out-of-state students. I mean, certainly your state residency is not going to limit you in terms of where you can apply for at least the private schools. I mean, public ones obviously is a little bit different. And then for osteopathic schools, since the majority of them are private, obviously it does not matter where your in-state residency is.
Yeah, agreed. Okay, my friend's daughter got a 510 on the MCAT, but couldn't get in MD and got in DO in Texas. Is that common in all of the states? Do you want me to answer this one since you just answered a similar question?
Yeah, a lot of Texas questions.
Yeah. Different people, a lot of Texas questions. Yeah. There are so many variables in this process that it is very rare that we sort of will make a blanket statement like, okay, you got a 510 and you only got in, I don't want to say only, you got into a DO school in Texas, which is phenomenal. Is this common in all the states? There are so many variables and nuances in this process that we could never take a result like this and kind of say this applies to all states. Every year, this year included, we've worked with students with 510s who didn't get into MDs, but we also worked with students with lower than 510s who got into MDs. So we look at everything. We think about who's writing your letters of recommendation, what your experiences are, how have you written about your experiences. There is no question that when we work with our students on their documents, meaning their personal statement, their secondary essays, their application entries, we are getting them to compose those documents in an authentic and compelling way. And that's what is generally what, the application itself is sort of what earns you the interview. And then it's how you do on the interview and how you're perceived during the interview that gets you the acceptance. So again, there are so many variables. So if she got into a DO school, I mean, she can decide to go there, or if she wanted to try and apply out of state, she could try that too, or even try a second time applying to Texas schools, depending on, what her goals are. We certainly have people who reapply to medical school, even to the same schools that they applied to the initial time on a reapplication, and they get accepted to those schools that they didn't get into the first year, or they get into other schools that they just were flat out rejected from the second year. So, it's so variable. Outcomes are not predictable. I wish they were, but they're not. All right. Related to study abroad, which we were just talking about. And Dr. Trish, let me know when you have to go. I know that you have a time you need to leave. So just let me know and I'll just continue on my own. My daughter is taking a medical policy class in Copenhagen in her last senior semester. How is studying one semester abroad looked upon for medical school admission? And Dr. Trish, you kind of touched on this before.
Yeah. I'll answer this one and then I will hop, but
yeah, sure.
I think, a study abroad experience can be very meaningful in a student's life. And the way it's not the actual experience so much that we're looking at, but how it impacted the student and how it impacted how they view themselves as a future physician, and what they feel that their roles and responsibilities will be. And I think with a lot of activities, that's what we're looking for. It's how did you demonstrate those core competencies within this experience? And I think that a semester abroad, you have the opportunity to demonstrate core competencies in a way that is unique and different from other experiences, but you have to frame it and write about it in that way, right? And so, it's not like a hard thing where I'm looking and I'm like, okay, well, she went to this specific school in this specific city and studied this specific thing. I mean, unless you're a Rhodes Scholar, I don't really care, right? Like, it really doesn't matter which country you were in or what you were doing. I want to know what did you take from that experience and how is that going to shape you moving forward? That's my answer to that question, Dr.
Wonderful.
Freedman.
All right. Well, Dr. Trish, thank you so much for being here tonight. And we really appreciate your input. And I will talk to you soon, I'm sure. Have a
Yeah,
great
thanks
night.
for having me.
Sure. Thank
Bye.
you. All right. Take care. Have a good night. Okay, everybody. It's just me. All right. All right. Monica asks about transcripts. And this is something that I always need to look up every year because AMCAS and AACOMAS are very, very particular when it comes to transcripts. So can you send AMCAS and AACOMAS transcripts electronically, and what information is needed, or do we need to mail the transcript request form to them? So it depends on what your school's process is. They do prefer that you mail these electronically, and both AACOMAS and AMCAS have different processes for how you're going to be sending those transcripts to them. So you really want to find, and they're a little bit different and a little too complicated to kind of go into on this live, but you want to follow the directions from AACOMAS and AMCAS exactly in terms of how they want those transcripts to be sent to them. Okay. All right, that was already answered, I think. Okay. So this is a follow question about high school activities. So if a high school activity is not continued in college, can it still be listed in the shadowing volunteering if the shadowing and volunteering was significant? Generally speaking, high school activities are going to drop off of the application when you are applying to medical school. The only way that this is not going to happen is if you had an accomplishment in high school that was at the national or the international level. So certainly if you started exploring your interest in medicine through volunteering, through shadowing as a high school student, this is information that we might want to get into your narrative to kind of show that you had this longstanding interest in medicine and that you explored that interest fairly early on, but we wouldn't want this to be in the activity section. So no. Okay. Can the extracurricular taken at an early college program be listed on the med school application? So this is the same question as the previous question. So no. So anything that's taken during high school really falls off the med school application unless it is continued into college. My son's AP physics is very rigorous and he has done very well. That's awesome. And I know AP physics is super rigorous. If he gets a 5 on the AP exam, should he get that credited for the college level? How is that looked at on med school applications? So our general recommendation is you do not want to take AP credit for chemistry, biology, or physics. And the reason is because not every medical school is going to accept those AP credits to satisfy their requirement, let's say for physics or chemistry. So we recommend, even if you get a stellar AP score, you get a 5, you can place out. We recommend, just to be safe, because you don't know what those requirements are going to be in 4 years or 3 years when your child applies to med school. We don't know if those requirements are going to be the same for a lot of med schools. And we also don't know what medical schools your child is going to be applying to and what their requirements are going to be when they apply to med school. So to be on the safe side, we're still recommending that students take those prerequisites. Absolutely. Okay. Regina asks, I heard that many med schools prefer to accept students that live in state. Is this true? So for medical schools that are funded by the state, they do prefer, many of them, to take in-state students. The question is, what percentage of in-state students? So there's some state schools that won't take any students from out of state. There are other state schools that might be taking 50% of their matriculants from out of state. So it's really, really variable. And we recommend that you look at the MSAR, the Medical School Admissions Requirements, which is an online database where you can find all of this information and a ton more information to see if this, which state schools are going to consider out of state applicants. And this is something that we're very careful about when we're looking at student school lists as well. Okay. Regina asks, my daughter is considering her phlebotomy license to have access to patient care in labs and hospitals. Is that a good idea? That is a great idea. Phlebotomy is something that not many pre-medical students pursue, and it is a fabulous way to get hands-on clinical experience where you're working with patients, where you're working in a healthcare setting, and where you're really learning about hospital operations, clinic operations. You're learning about patients from different backgrounds who have different types of medical problems. So I love phlebotomy as a pre-medical opportunity, and you can make money because it's, you can get a great position as a phlebotomist. So I think that is a wonderful, wonderful opportunity. All right, so we had some fantastic questions tonight. I thank you all so much for being here. I know that it is graduation time, and so for anyone who is graduating, I would just want to congratulate you on a job well done, finishing up college. Okay, wait, hold on one second. Let me just answer this. Let me just do a clarifying. Let me just answer. I'm confused regarding your answer a question regarding early college extracurriculars. I was told early college is treated as undergrad years since the students attend classes with undergraduate students in their undergraduate college. So if your student is in high school attending a pre-college program alongside undergraduates, it still counts for your student as a high school activity because they did it during high school. If they took classes where they received undergraduate credit, then that's something where they could potentially apply those credits to the college that they ultimately attend. But in terms of the activities that they're doing during high school, for them, that's a high school activity, even if it's part of a pre-college program at an undergraduate college. I hope that clarifies things. So I want to thank you all so much for being here tonight. It's great to see everybody. If you are not a part of our Facebook group, please go ahead and join. If you are applying to medical school this cycle, please reach out to us. If you need any assistance, we'd be happy to speak with you, or you can sign up for a free 15-minute consultation. And we'd be happy to talk to you about that. And if you're graduating, if you're finishing up your school year, I know a lot of students are in finals, finishing up in finals. And so I wish you the best of luck as you finish up the school year, or if you're graduating, congratulations. And we will see you back here next week, and have a terrific weekend in the meantime. Okay, bye-bye.